Hey there, Nation, and welcome to the show where we help you to play miniatures wargaming on a budget. It is I, Commander Cheapskate, and we are back with another episode of Way of the Underhive. This series is dedicated to helping brand new players to Necromunda build their starting rosters and learn more about the game mechanics of their favorite gangs. And on today's episode, we will be discussing playing a Water Guild Outcast Gang for your campaigns of Necromunda Ashwaste. We will discuss their strengths, their weaknesses, their fighters, their playstyle, and provide critical information that you can use in your campaign. And at the same time, also provide you a starting roster with 1,400 credits for you to use in your very first Ashwaste campaign. The nice thing about the Outcast Gang is that Outcast Gangs have added a lot of variety and diversity of different type of gangs that you can face now in Necromunda, especially now that you can take delegation gangs from each of the different merchant guilds, criminal organizations, as well as noble houses. So this merchant guild that we're focusing on will be on the Water Guild, and of course now that we have add vehicles now to the Ashwaste, it actually mitigates a lot of the weaknesses that Outcast Gangs previously had in the Underhive. So that being said, let's get this video on a roll by start talking about the strengths and weaknesses of playing a delegation gang in Necromunda Ashwastes. Alright, so let's talk about the strengths of actually playing an Outcast delegation gang from the Merchant Guild. So the strengths that you have, of course, are potentially it's one of the most powerful starting gangs in a campaign to use a delegation gang. And the reason why is because a lot of these delegation gangs start off with excellent equipment and skills for almost all their fighters right from the start. So that's actually one of the nice ways about that. You can start with better weapons, better equipment, better skills, in some cases even better stats with some of your fighters than your opponents will, which gives you a really good edge at the beginning of a campaign. At the same time, you can also take advantage of the new weird disciplines that came out from the book of the Outcasts, and you can actually use those weird disciplines out in the Ashways as well. So that part is really cool too. Now, probably the biggest strength that's actually impacted Outcast delegation gangs the most has probably been the access to vehicles, especially vehicles with heavy weapons and special weapon options on those vehicles. Some of these delegations actually really suffered from things like lack of heavy weaponry or speed or maneuverability or whatever the case may be. So vehicles with these heavy weapons really give these delegation gangs a real advantage out in the Ashways of Necromunda. So now that we're done talking about the strengths of playing a delegation gang, let's go and talk about the weaknesses. Alright, so perhaps the biggest weakness of actually playing a delegation gang that's an Outcast gang is that you cannot take any alliances whatsoever. If you decide to use the delegation as the core of your gang, no alliances are available to you. So for example, if you're a merchant guild delegation gang, you can't take criminal alliances or noble house alliances, and vice versa for all the other ones as well. So that's one of the biggest weaknesses of playing a delegation gang. If you really like using alliances to help your gang out, this might not be the one for you. However though, like I said before in the strengths, it does give you a leg up in the actual beginning of a campaign because you have better fighters, better equipment, and better skills. Now, one of the weaknesses of this gang, of course, is that if you decide to play WYSIWYG, which is an acronym for what you see is what you get type of gangs, this can be quite pricey in my opinion. And the reason why is because, for example, if you were to play a Nautican SYPHONING delegation, for example, as the core of your gang, and you want to buy the Forge World miniatures in order to fill that gang, those Forge World miniatures can be quite expensive. So because of that, I would suggest looking for cheaper alternatives or convert your own in most cases. A lot of these delegations have not been manufactured yet, so you could possibly do that, but that's just something you might want to take into account. Me, of course, I would never actually do that. I would just convert my own or find alternate ways to get cheaper miniatures, and that's the thing I would keep in mind when I would be playing a delegation gang. At the same time, these gangs are also very expensive to field in terms of credits. These delegations, like I said, have a lot of skills, a lot of weapons, better stats, and you're going to pay for those. For example, I think the cheapest of the delegations starts off at like 540 credits, I believe. So because of that, it's going to be very, very expensive for you to field these fighters, but that's the way it goes. And lastly, probably the biggest weakness of actually playing an Outcast delegation gang is that you do have to be aware of the balance bandwagon. A lot of balance bandwagon types will scream overpowered or game breaking or unfair and so on and so forth. But of course, once again, just ignore those immaturity of those players, drink the salt of their tears, and just use that to power yourself in destroying your enemies. So these are some of the strengths and weaknesses involved with playing a delegation gang. Alright, so when it comes to delegation gangs, once again, you get to pick from merchant guilds, criminal syndicates, or noble houses, and use those delegations you get from those alliances to form the core of your gang. Leaders also get archetypes and affiliations depending on what delegation you choose. Also, champions also get archetypes as well, so that allows for a lot of customization for your different members of your delegations depending on the affiliations and the archetypes that you choose. Now, once again, remember, archetypes depend on what kind of primary and secondary skills your champions and your leaders receive, while affiliations usually determine what kind of weapons and equipment you can get from the starting list, if not from the trading post as well. At the same time, the nice thing about these delegations is that the members of those delegations gain experience and they can purchase weapons and equipment over time, just like any other gang. So that part is really cool. And once again, I have to make sure I stress this a lot. If you decide to take a delegation Outcast Gang, you cannot make any alliances whatsoever in the future. So just be aware when that actually happens and keep that in mind. Alright, so the last thing we're going to do real quick is talk about which specific merchant guilds you can actually take delegations for in order to create your Outcast Gang. So there are 5 delegations from the merchant guilds that you can actually use to make your core of your gang. If you'll notice, the Guild of Iron is not on here, and the reason why is because the Guild of Iron consists of D3 plus 2 Hive Scum, so they really didn't have any unique delegations for them. However, from the list that you can choose from, you can either choose the Pyromantic Conclave to be the core of your gang. You could use the Nautican Siphoning delegation to be the core of your gang. You could use the Slaver Entourage from the Slavers Guild, the Corpse Harvesting Party from the Corpse Guild, or the Toll Collectors from the Guild of Coin. And depending on which of these delegations you choose will form the core of your gang, as well as what skills and weapons and equipment they have. Now, it should be mentioned that whatever war gear, equipment, and weapons that these delegations have, you can also use those items to outfit your Outcast champions as well as your Hive Scum with those same weapons as well. So if you can't get things normally from the trading post or from the starting lists, you can get it from there because purpose of the fact that your delegation can share those materials with the rest of your gang as well. So now that we're done talking about the delegation gangs as well as the merchant guild delegations you can choose from, let's go ahead and talk about your specific merchant guild on the next slide. Alright, so first of all, let's talk about the Nautican Siphoning delegation. Now this delegation is going to cost you 435 credits in order to field it to be the core of your Outcast Gang. Now it's a very solid delegation with a good mix of range and close combat in it. It's very useful in combat, especially with toxic weapons and great supplies, and these toxic weapons come in the form of needle pistols, needle rifles, as well as stiletto knives. At the same time, besides the fighters you get with this delegation, this list also gives you access to needle rifles, needle pistols, stiletto knives, bio boosters, and Stimm slug stashes that you can purchase for your other Outcast fighters within this delegation gang, which is really nice as well. Now, oddly enough, this Nautican Siphoning delegation actually makes a really handy Psyker gang as well, and the reason why is because the willpower stats for both the Master Nautican as well as the Syphonite are actually quite strong. And by using Chronomancy, which is one of the new disciplines that was released in the Book of the Outcast, this will help mitigate a lot of the handicaps in shooting, especially for this gang. Traditionally, these delegations always suffered a little bit with shooting. It was a little bit lackluster, but now that we can use Chronomancy, that could solve a lot of our problems as well. Plus, the miniatures from Forge World are really cool looking, so if you want to purchase those to form the delegation of your gang, that'd be pretty cool. Even though they are kind of neat though, I would try to buy them secondhand if possible, just because I'm a little bit of a cheapskate, or more importantly, maybe I'll just convert my own, just because I really don't feel like paying Forge World prices for those kind of miniatures. So now that we're done talking about the delegation real quick, let's talk about the fighters that make up the Nautican Siphoning delegation. Alright, so first of all, let's talk about the Master Nautican real fast. The Master Nautican will be the leader of your delegation. For their stats, they actually have a 4-inch movement allowance, as well as 4+ weapon skill and 4+ ballistic skill. They have 3 strength and toughness, as well as 2 wounds. They have 4 initiative, 1 attack, 7 leadership, 7 cool, 6 willpower, as well as 6 intelligence. Now, the Master Nautican will be the leader of your gang and your delegation gang if you decided to use the Water Guild to form the core of your Outcast gang. And actually, oddly enough, like I said before, using a Wyrd archetype for this character will actually be a pretty strong move. And the reason why is because with a willpower of 6+, the Master Nautican will be able to activate their psychic abilities 72% of the time, which is actually quite good. In fact, if you level up your Master Nautican as time goes on, you could actually increase that willpower score even more and actually have much more successful chances of getting your psychic ability off. Like I said before, in my opinion, the best discipline to use for the Master Nautican is the Chronomancy discipline. Nice thing about using the Chronomancy discipline, you also get 1 additional action per battle, which means you can actually take 3 actions in 1 phase if you plan it out correctly. So it can be very important to pull that off, maybe to make an emergency exit or to do some additional shooting, or what the case may be. Now, when it comes to your Chronomancy discipline, I recommend taking Zen Shootist as your power, and the reason why is because it actually drops your ballistic skill down to ballistic skill 2, which will make your Master Nautican even deadlier when it comes to shooting with their needle pistol. Now, like I said before, these guys are actually surprisingly well equipped and suited for close combat. With that 4+ weapon skill, it's really going to help them out too. They can use their needle pistol as well as stiletto knife in close combat for additional attacks. They do have needle pistol, they also have stiletto knife, they do have mesh armor for that 5 armor save, they also have a bio booster booster to reroll injury rolls, and they have a Stimm Slug stash to really increase their strength and toughness and movement characteristic if they really need to, so that part's kind of nice. At the same time, the skills of the Master Nautican comes with a Step Aside, which is perfect for dodging attack using your initiative. However though, the best skill that this character comes with will be Overseer, and the reason why is so that way you can use it for double sets of activations. Traditionally, you want to use this Overseer ability on your Subnauticans, that way your Subnauticans gets 2 sets of activations, because the Subnautican is a close combat beast, so that part's really nice as well. You could also use that ability to pair up with any champions that are armed with really good shooting attacks, so that way they can shoot twice per phase, which would be also really cool as well. Alright, so up next we're going to talk about the Syphonite, and the Syphonite will actually be one of your champions for your gang. For their stats, they actually come with a 4-inch movement allowance, they have 5+ weapon skill, so not so great, but they do have a 4+ ballista skill. They have 2 strength, which is also not that great either, but they have 3 toughness, they have 1 wound, 4+ for initiative, 1 attack, they have 8 leadership, 8 cool, 6 willpower, as well as 6 intelligence. So when it comes to the Syphonite, it will be one of your champions that you'll have to give up to make this delegation. However though, just like their Master Nautican counterpart, the Wyrd archetype actually works really well for the Syphonite. With a willpower of 6+, the Syphonite will be able to activate their psychic abilities 72% of the time. And just like the Master Nautican, I highly suggest you take the Chronomancy discipline for the Zen Shootist ability. The ability to drop down your ballista skill to 2+ is going to be extremely important, especially since the Syphonite only has a 2 strength and only has 5 of weapon skill. So shooting is probably going to be the strength for this character as well. Now the Syphonite does come with mesh armor for a 5-up armor save. They also come with a needle rifle, which is great for toxin abilities, and a stiletto knife as well. And they also come with a cult icon for larger group activations. Now they do have the dodge skill, which is great for avoid being shot at, but it's not as great of a skill as it could be. In my opinion, I think you should actually pair up your Syphonite with one of your support fire teams so that way they get access to their needle rifle. Plus with that cult icon, they can activate larger numbers. They can also use their Zen Shootist ability to get off that 2+ ballista skill with their sniper rifle, with the needle rifle. So that's really going to help them out as well. And that pretty much makes up the Syphonite. Alright, so probably the best fighter in this entourage is going to be your Subnautican. This is your ganger level fighter. So let's talk about their stats real quick. So they come with a 4-inch wound allowance, they have 3+ weapon skill and 5+ ballista skill. They also have 5 strength, 5 toughness, 3 wounds, 4 initiative, 2 attacks. They have 8 leadership, 6 cool, 7 willpower, as well as 7 intelligence. So the Nautican is a close combat beast. It will also be one of the gangers in your gang as well. And for those of you guys who are fans of the video game series BioShock, this will give you some serious Big Daddy vibes because these guys are in diving suits. Like I said, the Subnautican is a beast in close combat. They do come with an armored undersuit as well as a hazard suit, which gives them a 5-up save against being shot at or fought against. But it also gives them immunity to toxin, gas, as well as blaze weapons. So those kind of weapons are usually used in order to hurt units with higher toughness and higher wounds. But with that hazard suit, it really helped them out. Same thing with Radphage. I forgot to mention that as well. Also protecting them with Radphage as well. Now the only problem with this guy though is that the Subnautican does not come with any weapons. He only has the open fist that does exactly the same weapon traits as the Goliath Zerker, which is still pretty strong, but in my opinion, you might want to pair him up with something more powerful in the future as a campaign develops. For example, chain swords would be kind of nice because you get parry, better yet chain axes. That also works out very well too. So because of that, it's just kind of good to give him better weapons in close combat so they can really dominate as well. At the same time, this guy does come with Berserker skill, which means he gets an additional attack. So when you combine that with a charge, he's got 4 attacks. Berserker skill give him 5 attacks. He's got paired weapons, which give him 6 attacks. He's going to destroy everything that stands in his way. You could also pair him up with the Master Nautican quite nicely, so that way the Master Nautican can spam Overseer on the Subnautican, which means this guy will be putting out 12 attacks or 2 sets of charges every time this guy gets activated. So as you can imagine, Subnautican is an absolute beast. So now that we're done talking about the Subnautican, let's talk about Outcast Champions as well as Outcast Scum. Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about the Underhive Outcast Champion real quick. For these gangs, these guys cost 60 credits apiece, and for their stats, they have 5-inch movement, 3+ weapon skill, 4+ ballista skill. They have 3 strength, 3 toughness. They also have 2 wounds, they have 4 initiative, 1 attack. They have 6 leadership, 7 cool, 8 willpower, as well as 8 intelligence. So let's go on and talk about these guys real quick. So when it comes to the Underhive Outcast Champions, they're very versatile, and the reason why is because their stats are pretty much mediocre. Now that's both a good and a bad thing. While while it might be bad because they can't excel at any one given thing, whether it's shooting or close combat, it does allow them to be able to equip a large variety of weapons and fulfill any role that you need them to fulfill within your gang as well. Now, when it also comes to your guys' Underhive Outcast champions, archetypes, of course, are very, very important. But the problem with these guys, though, is that their archetypes are very limited for their skills, in my opinion. For example, they have 5 different archetypes they can choose from, but they only have 1 primary skill, and each of those archetypes followed by 2 secondaries. So, for example, if you were to take the Brawler archetype, Brawn would be your primary with Ferocity and Leadership as your secondaries. If you were a Gunslinger archetype, Shooting would be your primary with Agility as well as Leadership as your secondaries. For a Survivor archetype, Ferocity would be your primary, followed by Combat and Leadership for your secondaries. For Mastermind, Cunning would be your primary, with Leadership and Savant as your secondaries. And of course, for Wyrd archetypes, your Psychic Disciplines would be your primary, followed by Cunning and Leadership as your secondaries. Unfortunately for the champion, there are no archetypes where combat is a primary, so that is kind of limiting on what you can do. So you won't be getting any skills really to increase your combat abilities, but better weapons and equipment choices could probably help out with that as well. Now, when it comes to their equipment and weapons, they can purchase pretty much anything they want to off the trading post, so long as it's within the rarity value of 8 on the trading post. So they are kind of limited in some of their choices, but the reason why that is the case is because you can take 1 champion for every 3 Hive Scum in your gang. So for example, if you have 6 Hive Scum in your gang, you can take 2 champions. If you got 9 Hive Scum, you can get 3 champions, and etc. So that's basically where the trade-off kind of comes in. And then finally, of course, we have our Underhive Outcast Hive Scum, which is your typical Ganger and Juvie level fighter for your gang. These guys cost 30 credits apiece. For their stats, they have 5-inch movement, 4+ weapon skill and ballistic skill, 3 strength and toughness. They have 1 wound, 4+ for initiative, 1 attack. They have 8+ for leadership, cool, willpower, and intelligence. And for their skill access, when they become a specialist, their primary is cunning, with ferocity as their secondary. Now, Underhive Scum, Outcast Scum, they're very mediocre, okay? But because of that, they're also very cheap to field. And even though they have very mediocre stats, they count as both gangers and juvie level fighters for your gang, and because their stats are still so mediocre, they can fulfill many different roles in your gang. You can equip them as shooters, close combat, you can use them as support, you can use them as suicide bombers, especially now that you can also put them on Waster dirt bikes. They make great pursuers on Waster dirt bikes, for example. So there's a variety of things you can do with these guys to fulfill pretty much any role that you want to. And plus, if you decide to make it into a delegation gang, you can also take better weapons equipment from the delegation lists as well. So that's another cool thing about Outcast Hive Scum as well. Now, unfortunately, you cannot start your campaign with an Outcast Specialist, so that part is kind of sad. Almost every single gang can have a Specialist except for Outcast, so that part is kind of sad, but that's the kind of the trade-off. Yes, you can't get those Specialists, but right at the start, but you have so many guys you can choose from, and plus your delegations can fulfill those roles anyways, so it's not that big of an issue. So that makes up your guys' Outcast Hive Scum. Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about the army list for this one. This one's called the AQUA-COLA Nautican Siphoning Delegation Gang. Costs you 1,400 credits. And the reason why it's called AQUA-COLA is because that's what they call Water and Man-Max Ferry Road. So first of all, you're going to have your Master Nautican. This guy's going to cost you 185 credits. The Master Nautican will be in Wyrd Archetype. They will be equipped with Mesh Armor, a Needle Pistol, as well as Stiletto Knife, and as well as a Bio Booster and a Stimm Slug Stash. They also got the Step Aside skill and Overseer skill, and you will give them the Chronomancy Discipline for their Archetype, for their weird powers, and you'll be giving them Zen Shootist for that 2+ Ballista skill. Next comes your Syphonite, who's going to cost you 90 credits. This is a Wyrd Archetype as well with Mesh Armor. They're equipped with a Needle Rifle, a Stiletto Knife, as well as a Cult Icon. They have the Dodge skill as well as the Chronomancy Discipline with Zen Shootist to give them that 2-up Ballista skill for their Needle Rifle. Your next purchase will be an Outcast Champions that costs you 145 credits. This fighter is going to have the Mastermind Archetype. You equip them with Mesh Armor as well as a Grenade Launcher with Frag and Crack Grenades, as well as a Stub Gun for a backup weapon, and they will have the Overwatch ability to interrupt enemy activations. Then you have your Subnautican. Your Subnautican will cost you 160 credits with Armored Undersuit with Hazard Suit, as well as Open Fist and the Berserker aspect. After that, you guys will have 2 Hive Scum, Hive Scum number 1 and 2. Both of them will cost you 70 credits apiece with Last Guns equipped with telescopic sights, so they get bonuses for aiming. At the same time, you have 2 more Outcast Scum, Scum number 3 and 4. These 2 fighters will cost you 70 credits apiece. They will be equipped with Hazard Suits, Chain Swords, as well as Stub Guns, so these guys will be your close combat fighters. And then afterwards, you'll have Outcast Scum number 5 and 6. Both of them will cost you 105 credits apiece. Both will have Stub Guns, Flails, as well as Waster's Dirt Bikes, so that way they can move around the battlefield quickly and engage their opponents in close combat. After that, you will also have 2 Scum Racers. Scum Racer number 1 and 2. They're both equipped exactly the same at 185 credits apiece. Both will have Walker custom vehicles with transport beds so they can transport fighters. Both will have extra armor to make them toughness 4 on their armor ratings. They will have boarding ramps to assist with +1 initiative for boarding actions, and both will have grenade launchers to fire both crack as well as frag grenades as well. Now this list consists of 3 fire teams. You have 1 support fire team and 2 assault fire teams. Your support fire team will consist of your Syphonite, your Outcast Champion, as well as Outcast Scum 1 and 2 and Scum Racer number 1. This fire team is providing longer range fire against enemies, suppressing them at distance. The Syphonite snipes at targets with their needle rifle using Zen Buddhist to mitigate penalties. Meanwhile, the Outcast Champion interrupts enemy activations with their grenade launcher. At the same time, Outcast Scum number 1 and 2 provide suppressing fire at longer ranges with their telescopic blast guns, earning an additional +1 to hit while aiming. Now, leads to say you might want to upgrade the Scum Racer number 1's Walker with better heavy weapons as the campaign continues. However, though, grenade launchers are just working just fine, firing frag as well as crack grenades if you need to. Needless to say, this fire team can also fight dismounted if necessary. After that, you guys have your Assault Fire Team number 1 that consists of your Master Nautican, your Sub Nautican, Outcast Scum number 3, Outcast Scum number 4, and Scum Racer number 2. This fire team's job is to move towards enemy as quickly as possible and to board enemy vehicles. The Master Nautican has Zen Shootist to make the most of their needle pistol as their walkers approaches the enemy at closer range. Now, once you're in range for boarding actions, the Master Nautican spams Overseer on the Sub Nautican for double activations through charging in close combat. At the same time, Outcast Scum number 3 and 4 tag along with the Nautican to assist in close combat using their chain swords as well as their stub guns. The nice thing is that their chain swords can also parry, gives them also a +1 to hit in close combat. Now, like I said before, needless to say, upgrading Scum Racer 2's Walker with better heavy weapons would be advisable. I would suggest a template weapon of some sort because of being getting in close combat. You could also get smoke vents to provide a -1 to hit cover as you advance forward, and this fire team can also fight dismounted if necessary. Now lastly, your second Assault Fire Team, Assault Fire Team number 2, consists of Outcast Scum number 5 and 6. This fire team's job is to skirt around the flanks, taking out dismounted enemy fighters, spam the Ride-By rule by using their fighters' flails in order to finish off seriously injured fighters with coup de grace as well. Now I would also suggest upgrading these fighters with more powerful weapons like grenades, such as demo charges and multi-bombs in the future, so that way they can do kamikaze run attacks against enemy vehicles. And this is what I like to call the AQUA-COLA Nautican Syphonine Delegation Gang for 1,400 points. It's highly aggressive, it moves very, very quickly, and does a lot of close quarters battle. So in conclusion, playing a Merchant Guild Delegation Outcast Gang is some of the great ways to add a lot of variety and diversity within a Necromunda campaign. That was actually one of the cool things that came out with the Book of the Outlands, that you got to see so many new gangs to be able to field into campaigns and keep things fresh, keep things interesting, and show a lot of cool different options you can actually do to make the world of Necromunda really, really awesome. At the same time, by playing a Merchant Guild Delegation Gang, you do have a lot of powerful options, and when you throw in vehicles and the equipment and weapons that it can take, you could even make your gang even more powerful as the campaign goes on. So in my opinion, pick your favorite guild, get yourself your very vehicles, whatever flavor you want to, head out to the Ashways and start to tame them for the name of your Merchant Guild and the name of Pride and Profit. Now, of course, as always, just watch out for the saltiness of the Balance Bandwagon. They're going to have a huge field day with this, screaming out grieving and overpowered and game-breaking mechanics, all that kind of stuff. But just remember when you defeat them and they start crying about it, to enjoy those tears and use it to warm your soul. So that's good to do for those of you guys. As always, please feel free to like, comment, and or subscribe. Your guys' input is valuable to us as always. Also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, as well as blogger.com for all the latest, greatest hobby news related to this channel. That's good to do for this one, you guys. We will catch you guys on the next one. Peace out and stay classy.